I don't really feel great about sneaking out a win against a team actively trying to tank. Boy, this has been a rough few games for the Minnesota Wild, to the point that John Hynes has called the team's play soft. Let's talk about it. The Wild hang on for dear life against the Chicago Blackhawks here tonight and pick up a 4-2 win. It's postcast time.
You are Locked On Wild Postcast, part of Locked On Minnesota on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
The Minnesota Wilds pick up a 4-2 win, a game they tried repeatedly to give away to a Chicago team that just did not want it at all. That was a great first period, especially. So clearly John Hynes' fiery message to his team about you need to pick up your play clearly worked to start, but the game just continued to deteriorate as it went along. Chicago just is so inept that they managed 4 shots through the first 2 periods of the game and still nearly found a way to win it. There are points, there are flashes, there are stretches of good play, but there also is just this undercurrent of not great decision-making offensively, not great play defensively, not great play on special teams. There are a lot of people that just continue to kind of coast their way through these games. And I got to tell you, it's starting to really piss me off because up to this point, I've been pretty, let's not go crazy, because the effort for the most part has been there. The effort has been, by and large, very good for this team. The last three games have been pretty bad. John Hynes was very upset about what happened in the game against Utah. Said that was the softest the Wild had played in any game this season. You follow that up with a pretty big no-show against Calgary over the weekend on Saturday, and you squeak by, and squeak by feels like it's being pretty generous. You squeak by against Chicago. I don't feel great about where the Wild's game is at right now. And we were waiting for this point in which the team got themselves back to mostly fully healthy, which they are now. And they're playing worse with Kirill Kaprizov in the lineup than they were without him in the lineup, which is a bit of a mess as well. You just have to be so much better against the teams that you are now chasing, that have caught you and have vaulted you in the standings in the Central Division. You have to be so much better against those types of teams. And the Wild have shown that they can be. They went into Colorado and beat an Avs team that was absolutely rolling without Kirill Kaprizov and Jared Spurgeon in the lineup. I'm getting to the point that I don't understand how you can have games like that and you can have what we have seen over the last 3 games. That was a repeat of what happened last year. Chicago generated a total of 1.84 expected goals against. They wanted no part of this game. This should have been 4 or 5-1 easy. They wanted no part of this game, but the Wilds let them back in. They opened the door and said, "Oh no, we insist. Come on back in." The Wild offensively generated 2.83 expected goals. They scored 4 with an empty netter. And you look at what the Wild generated offensively too. They had 35 total unblocked shot attempts. They got 5 medium danger, 4 high danger. So they did a good job offensively for the most part, but just that third period was just passive and excruciating to look at. But that is a form that we've seen from this team over the last few years that they seem to be reverting back to. I just don't know. Like I don't know. I don't know what's gonna fix it, because Hines now has been on record saying the play's got to improve. It was good for about 30 minutes. And then it seemed like the Wild thought that they had done enough, and they just took their foot off the gas. They turned the puck over a gajillion times again. Special teams let Chicago right back into the game. Opening power play goal given up within the first 9 seconds of the game. And at that point, Chicago was like, oh, no, the Wilds, it doesn't appear as though they want this one. So we're just gonna just, try our way to get back in. The home and away splits for me, you're now an under 500 team at home. You are 18-5-3 on the road. You have to find a way to the standard method of play is you win most of your home games and you find a way to win periodically on the road. The numbers for this team when they play at home compared to when they play on the road tell two completely different stories. They tell the story of a team that is of a not great team. If you put the home and road records next to each other and you didn't say what team it was, and you just said, here's the record of a particular team at home, and here's the particular team on the road, I would refuse to believe that it was the Minnesota Wild in both cases. Like, just listen to some of these numbers for the Minnesota Wild at home compared to on the road. The Minnesota Wild at home are 7-6-1 when they score first. At home, 12-2-1 on the road when they score first. When their opponent scores first, they're 4-6, which you would kind of expect. On the road, they're 5-3-2. When they outshoot their opponent, they're 4-2-1, 8-1-1 on the road. When outshot by their opponent, the Wild are 6-10 at home. Again, these are not the fact that these are the numbers at home. You'd expect these to be the road numbers. They're 6-4 at home in 1-goal games. They are 4-5 at home when they trail after one period. When they're tied after one period, they are 4-6. When they're tied after 2 periods at home, they're 4-1. These are supposed to be the situations in which you find that separator goal at home. Why have you had so much success doing it on the road as opposed to at home? And the only thing that I can think of as to why these numbers are the way that they are is that this Wild team does not handle expectations well at all, which we have known from the last few years. 2021, 2022, there weren't a ton of expectations for how the team was going to do, and the Wild just blew the doors off. After that season, the expectation was, well, we're going to run it back. They kind of did, but then lost in the postseason again. Last year, the expectation was, We're going to run it back again. They crumbled under those expectations. And this year got off to a hot start, but as the expectations started to ramp up, the play has started to come back down. We talked about it with Alex last week. The numbers on the road as opposed to at home. The Wild are minus 17 in the goals department at home. And they don't have a single positive goal differential in any period at home. On the road, where there are no expectations for them to fire the crowd up, they have a positive goal differential in every single period, including +7 in the first and the third. So if it doesn't have something to do with the expectations, I don't know what it is. And I know the team tried to figure it out over the weekend in saying our play style is just not where it needs to be at home. Well, guess what? When you're the home team, you're expected to be the one that scores, to get the crowd into it, to give them a reason to cheer. And the Wild have just not been able to do that consistently. And when they do, the opponent scores 30 seconds later, 20 seconds later. They have to get the home thing figured out, because it's great. Like, don't get me wrong. It's great having the ability to go into a tough road environment and pick up a win. But last I checked, being the road team in the postseason doesn't mean that you play 7 games on the road. It means you play 4. Can you win a series by winning all of the road games? Absolutely you can. But guess what? If you can't win at home, that means you have to win every single game on the road. That's a lot of pressure. But this team just has not consistently. And think of all the blowout games that have happened at home. Rarely have the Wild, in fact, I'm going to go ahead and count it right now. Rarely have the Wild been blown off the ice on the road. Let's look at the number of games on the road in which they have lost by more than 3 goals. Because I have mentioned it too throughout the course of the season. There are some games that are deceptive, especially the first couple of losses on the road for the Wild. The Los Angeles Kings game, they were down 2-1 into the third period, and all of a sudden the Los Angeles Kings scored 3 games to kind of separate themselves. You know, like good teams at home do, to separate themselves. And I lumped that in as a road game. My apologies. That was actually a game at the X. But that was a 2-1 game into the third period. The loss to Winnipeg on November 25th, I also lumped that into the road games. That was actually a home game too. Los Angeles Kings on the road on December 7th. That was a 4-1 loss on the road. That was, if I recall correctly, that was a 2-0 game into the third period. And you end up losing 4-1. The Philadelphia game, the Wild were never really out of it on the road because the Flyers just refused to try to win that game. The Wild just handed it to them at every corner. But Philly was like, no, we don't want this. So we'll let you continue to be in it. So on the road, losses of more than 3 goals. 5-0 to the Winnipeg Jets on December 21st is the first one of those. That is the only, at Nashville on January 18th. The Wild have 2 lopsided losses on the road. How many do they have at home? I'll throw the Kings in because it is more than 3. But like I said, it was 2-1 in the third. So that's 1. Winnipeg, that was only 3. Edmonton, 7-1. That's 2. Florida, 6-1. That's 3. Colorado, 6-1. That's 4. Utah, 4-0 at home. That's 5. So you got 4 losses of at least 4 goals at home. I don't understand. I don't get it. Why is it impossible for this team to gain any traction on their home ice? In front of the fans that pay to go see them play at home. I don't get it. But let's gravitate more towards this game. So obviously you had the 2 goals in the first. Jared Spurgeon scores his 5th of the season, his 4th against Chicago this year. Freddy Gaudreau adds 1 in the first period. So you're off and running. Chicago manages 1 shot on goal in the first period. This is setting up to be a blowout. This is setting up to be a run them off the ice on the second night of a back-to-back. Run them off the ice. Joel Eriksson scores a power play goal in the second. You got a 3-0 lead. Still tracking for a game that is not going to be a sweat at all. Power play goal allowed within the first minute of the third. And from then on, I fully expected the game to go to overtime. Because you can't just kick your feet up offensively and expect that it's not going to be a struggle for the rest of the game. You get the empty netter from Marcus Foligno, but Frankie Nazar scored in the first 4 minutes of the third. So you had 14 minutes of game time, including multiple Chicago power plays in that span. And you're hanging on for dear life. So, yeah, I'm a little ticked that this game played out the way that it did. Because it's just, it's soft hockey. It's soft hockey is what it is. They played soft against Utah. They played soft against Calgary. Alex and I are going to talk about this more for tomorrow's episode, but Marc-Andre Fleury gets punched in the face and nobody does anything about it. If that would have happened 10 years ago, the guy that did that would have left in a body bag, and the player that took it into their own hands to respond would have left in a police car. For your goalie getting punched square in the face during a scrum. Last night? Nothing. So your standout performers in this one tonight. Boldy with a 3-assist night. Joel Eriksson had a goal. Marcus Foligno had a goal and an assist. Freddy Gaudreau had a goal tonight. Jared Spurgeon had a goal. But just so many quiet nights. Murat Kuznetsov, another night with no shots. That's starting to become too much of a trend. Devin Shore had 1 shot. Ryan Hartman got bumped down to the 4th line because John Hines put a few players on the bench, rightfully so, in Declan Chisholm, because Declan Chisholm has been a turnover machine lately, so he got scratched. Yakov Trenin has gone invisible again offensively, so he got scratched. And Ryan Hartman got bumped down to the 4th. He had he had 3 of the 4 shots the 4th line generated tonight. It's not even remotely enough. And it's multiple players in this grouping that are just, they're not giving you anywhere close to what is needed for a team to be competitive and to now chase down Dallas and Winnipeg, because Dallas has finally caught and leapfrogged the Wild. Chicago's nipping right at their heels, or Colorado is, excuse me. It feels like a flip of what happened last year. You get off to just the most hideous start imaginable, and you dig out of it a little bit, but it's nowhere near enough to make the playoffs. This year, you get off to the one of the best starts in team history. And now you are having to really gut out wins against a Chicago team that is actively trying to tank. And you can't use the injury situation as an excuse anymore, because the player that runs the offense and stirs the drink, he's back in the lineup. Jonas Brodin is the only piece that is missing right now. And I'm not trying to downplay what Jonas Brodin brings to the table, but we spent the last 4 weeks saying, just wait till Kaprizov gets back. Just wait till Jared Spurgeon gets back. And the product on the ice, since those two got back into the lineup, has been arguably the worst of the season. So, I don't know. You tell me. It's not enough. It's not anywhere close to being enough. You have a handful of games to get it figured out. You've got, I don't know. You are at game number 5. No, that can't be right. It's got to be more than that. You're in the 50s from a games perspective. So you are running out of time. They're at game number 50 even. I didn't trust my own math. I guess I should have. You've got 32 games remaining. But now you got to fend off the red-hot Colorado Avalanche to stay in the top 3 of the division. Otherwise, then you get put in the fray for the wild card, and thankfully there's a little bit of a cushion between wild card 1 and wild card 2. And guess what? You play Calgary a few more times the rest of the season, and Calgary really has had no trouble with Minnesota this year. And I don't want to hear the well, that game ended up being a lot closer. That game was close because the Wild controlled the final 2 minutes. What happened to the other 58? You got one more crack at Calgary in the third to last game of the season. And guess what? It's in Calgary. And Calgary right now is 7 points back of Minnesota, 5 points back of Wild Card 1. It's got to get way better. I'm interested to hear John Hines' thoughts, because everything that I heard, he was as mad as he has been at any point since taking over for this team. He was as mad as he's been after the game against Calgary. I say good. I say well done, because the play has dropped off over the last 3 games especially. The losses before that you could at least stomach because of the effort level. But when the effort level disappears and you're just kind of out there existing, that's when it starts to become an issue. So, yes, you got the 2 points tonight, but you do that against any other team, any other non-tanking team in the league, and you come away with a loss in that game. Pretty easy. So use that as use that as an opportunity to not do that again. Ugh, ick. Anyway, just want to quickly go to some of the particular numbers from this game. We're tweaking the format a little bit for the postcasts. I'll explain that more as we go, but just look at the back and forth look at the stats in this game between these two teams. And for the audio listeners, I'll read them out for you. The Wild had 28 shots on goal. Chicago had 20. And again, Chicago had just 4 shots on goal through the first 2 periods. 4 shots on goal through the first 2 periods. Both teams were 1 for 3 from the power play. Chicago handled the faceoff dot. 33 wins for them, 24 for the Wild. 26 hits for Chicago, just 10 for Minnesota. Wild did have the edge in blocks, 16-12. As far as the Wild offense goes, they did generate, as mentioned, 35 total unblocked shot attempts. They had 26 low danger shots attempts. Now, this isn't necessarily shots on goal. This is attempts. 5 medium danger shot attempts and 4 high danger shot attempts. How did Chicago do? Chicago had 38 unblocked shot attempts. 30 were low danger, 7 were medium danger, and 1 were high danger. Now let's think about that for a second. The Minnesota Wilds held Chicago to 4 shots on goal through the first 2 periods, and yet Chicago was able to out-attempt them for the total game. If that's not an indicator of just completely just leaving the table, like you're flagging down the waitress and saying, "Check, please," before the food even gets there. Big ol' yuck bag. So we'll I don't know if the quotes from what Hines says, it sounds like he's going to have a better update Tuesday on Jonas Brodin and Marcus Johansson. Johansson has at least started skating. Pretty clear at this point that Marcus Johansson is the only thing that pushes this team forward. When he's not in the lineup, they just are not the same. Not the same team. After dominating the first 2 periods and allowing only 5 shots, the Minnesota Wild's easy win became a nail-biter, but they hang on to improve to 18-5-3 on the road. That from Michael Russo. I think that sums it up pretty succinctly. If we do have John Hines comments, I'll throw them in the post game here. But if not, then that will be one of the episodes tomorrow. I'm intrigued to hear what Hines has to say after that one, because it's pretty clear that it was a good period and it was a lot of yuck after that. So that's just been a little bit too common of a theme here. And guess what? This is the start of a 5-game road trip. You play Toronto next, then you play Montreal as part of a back-to-back, Wednesday, Friday. Then on Saturday the 1st, you're at Ottawa. Tuesday the 4th, you are at Boston. It's a tough stretch. It's a tough stretch on the road. But hey, guess what? We win all the games on the road. So that at least should give you some hope that the Wild can pull out some points here over this upcoming stretch. Oh, we've got a home and home against Detroit coming up at the end of February. I'm not a fan of those. Anyway, we're going to break. We will get to your comments and thoughts about this game and the season in general. So throw them into the comment section here. But as mentioned, we are going to get to a quick break. And then we'll continue tonight's postcast. Minnesota Wild hang on for dear life as they beat Chicago 4-2. More Locked On Wild postcast is coming up for you right after this. Today's episode of Locked On Wild is brought to you by FanDuel. Folks, Super Bowl 59 is here. One game, two teams, and endless possibilities. There's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. Whether it's predicting the first touchdown, calling the MVP, or even betting on the coin toss, FanDuel makes it easy to get in on the action. With live betting all game long, you can adjust your bets as the game unfolds and feel the thrill from kickoff to the final whistle. The live betting feature lets you stay involved no matter what happens on the field, and the app is super easy to navigate. Plus, knowing that, you can place a $5 bet and potentially win $200 in bonus bets for the Super Bowl. And that is the icing on the cake. We know the matchup now. It'll be the Kansas City Chiefs and the Philadelphia Eagles, the rematch. Not the one that I think a lot of people are hoping for, but that's the card we're dealt. So download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. Bet just $5, and if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Bet with FanDuel, official partner of Super Bowl 59. Welcome back to today's episode, postcast of a Minnesota Wild win over Chicago. 4-2. And we'll start with, it is a very Minnesota sports thing to do exactly what this team is doing. This is what they did in 2011, 2012, is got to the top of the mountain, led the league in points, and just continued to free fall from there. There were some key injuries that took place, but the team mostly just fell off a cliff to the point that they missed out on the playoffs entirely, which that's not an easy feat. And it's crazy to me that the Wild had the same record through 30 games as that team did. One game different. The Wild were, I think, 26-4 this year, and that year they were 27-3. But you know what we say about overtime losses. The everydayers know exactly how I feel about those. It's just a loss with points. So 20-10 both seasons. And everything that was clicking early on, everything that was clicking through the first part of Kirill Kaprizov's absence is gone. Way too much money wasted on guys that disappear. Too many players that have been largely absent in these big stretches. And you need those players to step up. I don't have to mention that because we've seen it play out time and time again. It's basic knowledge at this point. You need to have players that can step up to take pressure off of your top guns. They can't just be asked to do it themselves. And yet, every time we get in this situation, I'm going to read you some of the point totals of players at home this season. Here are the point totals for different players at home. Marcus Johansson, in 22 home games, has 1 goal, 8 assists, 9 total points. Ryan Hartman, in 24 home games, he has 3 goals, 5 assists, 8 points. Marcus Foligno, 24 home games, 2 goals, 5 assists, 7 points. Yakov Trenin has 3 points in 20 home games. Jakub Lauko has 1 point in 12 home games. Murat Huznadinov has 1 point in 23 home games. On and on and on and on. How about on the road? Matt Boldy has 26 points in 25 road games. Kirill Kaprizov has 29 points in 17 road games. Marco Rossi, 24 points in 25 road games. Matt Zuccarello, 17 points in 18 road games. Joel Eriksson, 10 points in 18 road games. Marcus Foligno has 9 points in 25 road games. Ryan Hartman, 8 points in 20 road games. The splits, I don't understand the splits. I don't get it. You're supposed to play better. You're supposed to play way better at home than you do on the road. Let's talk about this a little bit from Matthew. Still pissed off they broke up a line that was gelling when Kaprizov came back. I mean, I can understand the rationale behind it because Kirill, Rossi, Zuccarello were playing pretty good before Kaprizov got hurt. That was a line that was pretty serviceable as a top line. So I get it there, but I think you really have to do the what have you done for me lately? And that was a line combination in Rossi, Boldy, Zuccarello that was really doing some good things. And now all the scoring is quiet up until the last 2 minutes of the game. Now, with Kaprizov's track record, I am hopeful that things will start to iron themselves out with that line combination. But that second line continues to be an absolute pit of despair. And second line tonight. Second line was Boldy, Ek, and Ogren, I do believe. Joel Eriksson Ek had a goal that occurred on the power play. Beyond that, second line was pretty quiet again. It's like it, and then the third and the fourth line. I mean, Foligno had the empty netter tonight. Freddy Gaudreau did score, but that was the first time that he had scored in a minute again. The play of lines 2, 3, and 4 from an offensive perspective is way more non-existent than it is. They did bump. Okay, they did bump Ek up to the top to try to again get him going, but I mean, these line combinations are just largely ineffective. Line 3, line 4, they're more so just out there, but there's not a consistent threat for those lines to score. The only line that is a threat to score is whatever line Kirill is on. We've known this since Kirill came into the league. The lone exception being 2021, 2022, when players on that same line with Kaprizov, Zuccarello, and Ryan Hartman, when Kirill took all the attention away, turns out those guys had a lot of open opportunities. And credit for nailing them in those instances. But teams now put a little more pressure on the other pieces of that line, and they can take them out of the equation. And Dougie is correct here. From what I have heard, Joel Eriksson Ek is dealing with a pretty significant injury that has very clearly hampered his performance. And we're at this same point in the season again where guys are trying to fight through things. And is it better for them to be in the lineup and operating at 60% than it is to get somebody else that is a lower talent level, but is at least 100% healthy? I don't know, but I do know that from all reports, he is dealing with a pretty substantial injury. So that's another one that the Wild are dealing with right now. It's just that Ek is playing as opposed to being on the shelf. Liam Ogren's play tonight, 1 shot on goal. He was a +1. He had a block and a hit. Played 11 minutes, 41 seconds. But this is the thing. This is the thing that we talk about with young players all the time. It takes everybody a different amount of time to have that light bulb go off to where they get it. Okay, I just have to play my game, play my style, and fit in, as opposed to trying not to do anything that leads to mistakes. When you play tentative, when you structure your game to not make mistakes, that's when you make mistakes, because that's when you don't take chances you should. You don't make passes you should. Playing risk averse is worse than being reckless, because risk averse leads to more mistakes than, like, if Liam Ogren was passing all up and down the ice, was trying to fit passes into tight windows, then I would sit here and say, I like the thought process behind what he's doing, but in those types of instances, maybe err more on the caution side. But those types of plays aren't being made. And that's why I think we have seen this coaching staff be pretty hesitant to elevate him, and why they wanted him to just go to Iowa and do his thing and just build up his confidence about his process, and then you can integrate it as the season rolls on. But one guy and this has been a popular talking point amongst Minnesota Wild podcasts lately, and so I guess I'll add to the conversation there. It is time for Marat Huznadinov to get an Iowa stint. Well beyond time. It is time for Marat Huznadinov to get a stint down in Iowa, because I don't really know what you're getting right now. You're getting defense and speed, but you are not getting anything remotely offensive to his game. In the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 games in January, Marat has 9 shots on goal. 9 shots in 11 games. Not a great ratio. And to piggyback off of this from Amanda, he is currently on his ELC, Amanda. So there is the ability for him to be sent one way or the other. See, I thought I had heard this was the case too. Is that his previous KHL team owns the rights. And now I'm going to have to make sure to check. But I know plenty of other shows have been calling for Marat to get a little bit of a conditioning stint off the NHL roster. Because that play is not... he's got to step things up on the offensive side of the ice. You're not getting anything offensively. And it's to the point that he took 6 faceoffs against Chicago. He went 3 of 6, but you're basically throwing all of your faceoffs to either Rossi, Gaudreau, or Eriksson. And I get that his line mates have not done a thing either, but you just can't you can't have two lines in a lineup that just give you nothing from an offensive standpoint. You shouldn't be relying a ton on your fourth line to score anyway, but we're talking about not getting anything. You don't even get the threat of goals from that fourth line. On the road this season, road games this year, here are the stats. Murat Huznadinov has 1 point in... Okay, these are home games. My apologies. Let's go to road games. For the season, Murat Huznadinov has 3 points in 24 road games. Jakub Lauko has 3 points in 17 road games. Travis Boyd has no points. Brendan Gaunce has no points. Devon Shore, no points. Ben Jones, no points. Like, at some point, you've just got guys that are in the lineup to take up roster spots. They're not giving you anything, and that's where maybe no identity for the fourth line. Need to get guys who give you something: hits, scoring chances, shutdown. Got to give you something. Where's these Horde extensions to the Moose, Hartmans, and Freddy's look even worse to me. They also aren't doing jack, but are making the money. Like I said, that's why I said those bottom two lines are just not giving you anything. They're invisible. And that's why this team is struggling as much as they are to score. This is not just a small sample size that they have not been able to score goals. Again, if we do the splits, like let's just do from the start of the season to the end of November, and actually to December 3rd. The Wilds were 17-4-4. They were averaging 3.2 goals per game. So that's not like breaking the bank. But it's at least respectable. And since, if we go December 4th to today, the Wild are scoring 2.6 goals per game. 2.6 is not great. They have, in 25 games, scored 66 goals. I think the Wild could trade Ek and Trenin for JT Miller. I could see that being a deal. Vancouver doesn't want Yakov Trenin. Nobody does. I can promise you that. I'm not against the idea, Ace. Like, don't confuse that for me trying to tamper this down, because I actually would be in favor of going and getting a guy like JT Miller, but Vancouver doesn't want Trenin. Just like no team in the NHL wants Marcus Johansson or John Merrill or Zach Bogosian. You can't just pawn those players off on teams other than those teams that just want bad players in their lineup so that they can tank. That Trenin contract is not one that you're going to have to retain on that. You're going to have to retain on that contract in order to move Yakov Trenin. If you could get it down to $1 million a year, maybe somebody bites on it. But you then would have to be sitting with $3.5 million or whatever his salary is at this point. You'd have to eat about $2 million of that, $2.5 million per year for somebody to take that deal. Trennan is a fine fourth line piece on a contending team, but fourth line pieces aren't. You're not throwing $3.5 million at a fourth line piece. That'd be a deal where, like, the Tampa Bay Lightning would say, "We'll give you $850K to be a fourth line guy for us." Do we see Boldy at center again? We dabbled in it early in the season. Can't be much worse at faceoffs than we are at getting now. It'd be nice to see Matt Boldy at all. Yes, I know he had 3 assists tonight, but he hasn't exactly been lighting it up for the better part of 2 months since the hot start. He's been better in January, but December, he had 2 goals in the entire month of December. After a great start to the first 2 months of the season. Went ice cold, has gotten his game back on track a little bit, but it's like the rest of the team. It's got to be better. Got to be better than where it's at right now. That includes everybody. I'm not just singling out Matt Boldy, because, again, he's 23 years old, and I still think he's got a really bright future ahead of him. But the biggest piece of the puzzle for him is going to be to be present every game, as opposed to just these disappearing acts that he pulls for large stretches of time. Boldy went from the Philly game on December 14th to the Carolina game on January 4th with 2 total points. That's a stretch of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 games. 2 points. That's not good enough. You just have to be way better than that. I'm sorry. You just have to. What are your feelings on Billy getting these guys to waive their no move clauses? I'm not trying to go into bit mode here and like, oh, he's just pouting because the team lost a game. I don't think these guys waiving their no move clauses is even on the table. That is something that Bill Guerin has to come to that conclusion himself. I don't think that's on the table right now. Freddy's game this year has been substantially better than it was last year, but he was not good last year. So it was a high bar to climb. It's a team that it's starting to, like, we're starting to get some of those ghosts of last season that are crawling into the picture. And that was the thing that made last year so unbearable, is there were so many stretches of just lifeless play. The effort up until the last week or so, the effort has been substantially better. And you look at and I think the reason that it's so frustrating is you look at that Colorado game against the Avalanche on the road, without Kirill, without Jared Spurgeon. That was such an easy game to get completely amped up about, because they battled in that game the whole game. That was a week ago. Tomorrow. That was the 20th of January. That was such an easy game to get pumped up for, because the battle and effort level in that game was so good. Utah game, it was hit or miss. The Calgary game, it was gone until the third period. The Chicago game, it was there for the first, and it left in the second and never came back. Like, when the effort level leaves, that's when stuff starts to really, really... That's when it gets frustrating. There was another question in here that I wanted to get to in regards to Jesper for... Oh, here we go. From Dylan, do you think Jesper is going to be NHL ready to tandem with Gus next year? So Jesper is currently injured, and I looked into his statistics a little bit. And if you take out the two worst starts that he has this season, his goals against average is under 3. Now, to avoid bias, if you take out his two best starts, his goals against average is probably somewhere over 3. But I think we feel a lot different about that than we do his current numbers, which is a goals against average of just under 4 and a save percentage below 900. Considering that the goalie room has mostly been good, again, up until the last about 2 weeks, that has obviously not left a ton of opportunities for the Minnesota Wild to get Jesper starts. He's obviously going to be getting them next year because it's a one-way contract. I'm not really worried, honestly. I think this year is just going to be kind of a weird transition year for him because the goalie play has mostly been good. Now, if a goalie gets hurt and he comes back and he's healthy, that is going to be an opportunity for him to put a few more starts under his belt. But this is kind of the price you pay when you are a team that is actively pushing for a postseason spot. Development takes a back seat. Whatever you do, the decisions that you make are done for the betterment of the postseason run. Now, to be fair, if you flip it to the other side of the coin and you say, well, we're going to take a step back and we are going to, we're going to go to the prospects and we're going to really step back and rebuild this fully. Well, ask Chicago how that's going right now. Ask Anaheim how that's going right now. Ask San Jose how that's going right now. Continuing to push towards the postseason isn't the end-all, be-all answer. A full-scale rebuild is not the end-all, be-all answer. What you need to do as a GM is you just need to be cognizant of what is going on with your roster at any given moment. If your team is a team that's struggling, then yeah, maybe you call off the dogs. Maybe you take your foot off the gas and you say, well, we're going to work on development for this year, for the rest of this year, to see where we're at with things. But GMs just by and large, unless they absolutely have no choice, they don't just sell everything in the garage. So I still, considering that this is an absolute nightmare of a cap situation, if a trade's going to happen at the deadline, it's going to require somebody to broker 80 to 90% of the salary. And as Ace mentions here, at least with Zeev Boyum, it depends entirely on what happens with Yurov's KHL team. The KHL season is done March 23rd, and then the postseason is after that. So if Yurov's KHL team wins a round or plays in the second or third round of the playoffs there, you are to the end of April at that point. And unless you win a round in the postseason, your season is also over. Zeev, I think there's a very good chance that he makes it by the end of the season. But with Yurov, I don't see that happening unless they can get him like 10 or 12 games. And for the Wild to get Yurov 10 to 12 games, from March 24th to the end of the season is 12 games exactly. But that is assuming that the KHL season ends on the 23rd, and that doesn't involve a postseason for Yurov's team, which they're obviously going to the playoffs. So I think the target for Yurov is pretty solidly next season. Zeev, this year. Sign the ELC the moment the Denver season is done and get him up here. But beyond that, I think Yurov is I think that's a realistic target for this year, Yurov next year. What happened with the cap space? Thought we were doing pretty well cap-wise, or was that for the 2025-2026 season? Well, a lot of the extensions are going to kick in next year. Jake Middleton's extension kicks in next year. So he goes from $2.45 million this year to $4.35 next year. Brock Faber's extension kicks in next year. He goes from $925K this year to $8.5 million next year. You got Marco Rossi's extension. You've got Jesper Wallsted's extension will be on the books next year. And you will be in the final year of Kirill's deal, which he'll need a new one for 2026, 2027, and beyond. So the cap space that there was from Parise Suter is pretty much going to all go to extensions. Where the Wild will have money to spend is whatever the cap goes up by next year and beyond. That's where they're going to have money to be able to sign free agents. But we won't know that until the season is done. There have been rumors and reports that the cap could go up to 97 or 98 million, but that we won't know until the season is done. So at this point, if you go off of what has happened the last few seasons, you're talking about a $4 million bump. That doesn't leave you a lot. The Wild right now are pegged, according to Puckpedia. There was a number that showed exactly what they were expected to have. And it's not going to be a ton. Because you look at the players you have coming off the books. You've got Fleury coming off. You've got John Merrill coming off. You've got Marcus Johansson coming off. So that's a handful of million here or there. But like we said, you've got the extensions coming for key pieces. Now, if the cap goes up to 97 or 98, yeah, then you probably have a nice chunk of change to work with. But that's where these extensions for some of these players have caused a little bit of an issue, especially when locked into protections that require approval for trades to happen. So that's where the problem lies. But we'll be talking more about that tomorrow for Denny's show. 8 p.m. tomorrow night. Obviously, as you saw in the comments, Denny not able to join us here tonight, not feeling the best. So we'll have him on tomorrow night. When we'll if he's feeling up for it. If not, we'll move it to later in the week. But we'll obviously dive into the trade stuff quite a bit, because the other part of this too is the fact that the Wild have used long-term injured reserve as much as they have. They haven't accumulated cap space. So there's not a lot there. There's not a lot there for them to work with, which requires a broker, which requires giving something up for said broker to take that salary on. And if it's somebody who is signed to a multi-year deal beyond this year, then it gets messy. But hey, at least the Wild beat Chicago tonight. Kind of. That's going to wrap it up for tonight's postcast. Again, appreciate everybody tuning in here. As always, we'll have an episode coming with Alex tomorrow. We're going to talk about marc-andre Fleury getting punched in the face and seemingly nothing coming of it. So we'll talk about that. We'll talk about the weekend. We'll talk about John Hines' comments over the weekend about the Wild not choosing their hard correctly for these last few games. So we've got a lot that will be thrown at you, as well as Hines' reaction to the game against Chicago. We'll have his post-game comments. We'll react to those as well for you tomorrow. So make sure to hit the like button before you head out for the night, and we'll see how the Wild do. We'll see if key impact player Marcus Johansson can get himself ready to return to the lineup. We'll join you for another episode of Locked On Wild coming at you right away in the morning tomorrow. So enjoy the rest of your evening, and we will see you tomorrow right here on Locked On Wilds.